and welcome to the second edition of E's Art Tips. So I wanted to talk to my students a little bit about composition, and I was looking for videos online, and frankly there just weren't any that said exactly what I wanted to say. So I figured I'd go ahead and say it here and put together what I need. So I want to talk to you about the golden ratio, otherwise known as the golden spiral. It's based on something called the Fibonacci sequence. Now, Fibonacci was a guy who lived in the 1100s, 1200s, and he came up with this sequence. He wanted to see if there was a mathematical ratio to how rabbits would breed. And he figured he would get, two rabbits, he'd get two rabbits, two more rabbits, he'd get four rabbits, and in even increments. Well, that's not what happened. What happened is he put two rabbits together and he got a third. One rabbit and two rabbits made three. Those two numbers, 2 and 3, made 5 rabbits. 3 and 5 made 8 rabbits. So the sequence ends up being something like this. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 1 plus 2 equals 3. 2 plus 3 equals 5. And 3 plus 5 equals 8. And so on. If you look at the ratio between these numbers, it ends up being 1.618 or nearby. The higher you get in the numbers, the closer you get to this number being consistently the ratio between those numbers. Well, that number right there is the golden spiral, or the golden ratio. So what is that? Well, that's this ancient mathematical formula. They've known about it for hundreds of years, and even the Fibonacci sequence wasn't new. That was invented by the Indians, or discovered by the Indians, hundreds of years before Fibonacci discovered it. But you can look at it this way, and I'm just doing this without a ruler, so this is really rough, okay? But if you want to draw the golden spiral, you can draw a rectangle. Now, if I was going to be doing this mathematically accurately, the ratio of this height to this width would be this number. So how do you do that? This rectangle, you draw that same ratio of rectangle over here. Then you draw that same ratio over here. I made mine really long, it's going to be small. And you do it here and here. What you end up with is a diminishing amount of rectangles that are all the same ratio. You can actually turn this into a curve. So starting at this curve right here, you would curve around to that point right there, to that point, to that point. And you can see I'm not doing it very smooth, but you get the idea. What does that start looking like? Maybe a ram's horn, maybe a nautilus shell, maybe even the fiddlehead of a fern. It's also the cochlear bone inside your ear, or it could even be in your DNA. So this ratio is in everything in nature, and it's part of why, as designers, when we look at something and we say it's not working, it might be because of this, that the ratio is off. Another way to look at that is thinking the rule of thirds. Now, I did make mine very long, but if you think about it, let's say we flipped the whole thing and we did our tall rectangle on this side, and let's even flip it completely, and we went like this. Then we've got to draw our rectangle the other way, right? Or our spiral the other way. We start getting a pattern here. We get an intersection here, an intersection here, an intersection here, intersection here. Well, now this is called the rule of thirds. So in design, it's the brochure, of course, but oftentimes you'll want to have your focal point either here, or here, or here, or here. It creates a pleasing composition for the eye. Another way to think about this is balance. So when you start looking at this spiral, there's another shape that this might be reminding you of. I'll bet you know this one. That is yin and yang, right? Well, in yin and yang, one side's dark and one side's light. So when you start thinking about the balance of positive and negative space in your composition, you can actually use the yin and yang. It doesn't mean that all of your compositions need to be circles, but a good place to start with balance is to have this much negative space versus this much positive space. What is negative positive space? Let's say you were drawing a landscape with trees, and here's the ground, and here's the sky, and there's a bunch of big trees, and the sun's behind them, so these are all in silhouette, so these are dark. So let's say the sun's right here, and this is all dark. Well, what does that look like? Kind of looks like this, just lengthened out and on its side. So this is negative space because there's nothing physically there, and this is positive space because there is something physically there. So in children's book illustration, we have to always think about where the word's going to go. So a lot of times when you're designing that positive negative space, you're thinking, okay, my words are going to go here. That would be dark on light, but maybe it would be down here and it would be light on dark. So you get balance, and you get balance of the yin and yang. Another way to think about this is we end up with borders. So one of the biggest mistakes I see illustrators doing when they're just starting out is they'll draw things right up to the edge. Important information too, it'll be right up to the edge. Well, a big problem with that is those big printers, if they're going in to crop down your page and they're off by even 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch or even a 1/4 of an inch, anything, it's going to cut that information off. And it might be really important information that your viewer needs to see, so that can be a problem, obviously. So what do? You bring your design in from the edge. So this creates a safe zone. And if you've ever uploaded artwork to, say, Zazzle, Redbubble, stuff like that, they always will give you a template that will have a safe zone. That's what it's for. Ironically, the ancient reason for a safe zone was when you look at a book and you open a book and you have those big margins around the pages of a book. Let's see, I'm looking at Save the Cat Writes a Novel. These spaces right here, why did they used to have those? Believe it or not, it's because the mice would get to the books and they would eat and nibble on the pages. And if any information that was important was all the way out here, it's very likely you'd lose it because a mouse would eat it. So it's also something that feeds into good design. So always think about there's a border and none of your important information is going to be in that border. So safe zone. Never put anything important in this area. Never have anything important touching right up against an edge. Another way to think about this is the coincidence of line. So let's say you've got a bottle and you've got a second bottle. If you put that second bottle right here and they're lining up, they're sharing a line, which for a viewer, when you're trying to create a three-dimensional illusion with your drawings, you're trying to convince a viewer that things are coming backwards and forwards in space. And if you've got things like this going on, it makes it really confusing for that viewer to figure out which one's in front. They could maybe figure it out by the baseline. The baseline typically is going to be farther back. That one's going to be farther back. But if their eye is trying to figure out which one's going forward and back, guess where their eye's going? Right there. Well, maybe you have a label that's saying this is something important, and you want their eye going there. Well, if you've done this, it's going here first instead of where you want to send them. So your message gets skewed. So you want to go here, not here. So the way to fix that would be overlap. Overlap is a very important concept. So instead, your bottles would do this. Now they're not sharing a line. That's probably still a little bit more close than I would like for comfort, but you see how overlap can get rid of these vortexes, these coincidences of line that create confusion. And in drawing, whenever you say confusion, that's a bad word. That's a red flag. You don't want your viewer to be confused. So those are the main principles behind good design. And you can see, because of the golden ratio that's been around for hundreds of years and it truly exists in our DNA, why we look at these things and some things resonate with us and feel right and other things don't resonate with us and feel wrong. These are some of the reasons. So if you integrate these philosophies into your design, hopefully that will help you improve. So I hope you've enjoyed this Ease Art Tips, and I've gotten a new setup, so hopefully this one came through a little bit better and you're able to see things a little bit more clearly. And I look forward to giving you another edition of Ease Art Tips sometime soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.